Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds, and I have Pamela Gupta here. This is the Cybersecurity and Data Privacy Fix, where we talk about issues once a month that we think people will be interested in learning more about. So we always try to stay with current events. So, Pamela, would you like us to start talking about WhatsApp?
Yes, I think what I think there's been some confusion in terms of the new policy that WhatsApp has unleashed or is threatening to unleash. And
Right,
in all fairness, they have, due to the uproar, gone and promised to revise it. But I want to talk about what does it mean? Why
right,
is this an issue? Because a
right,
um, common response is
right,
always we're not sharing any secrets. We're not sharing the
right.
formula in our conversation, so I don't need to care about this, right?
Yeah,
No, answer is yes, you do need to care because they're not after the Coke formula. That would be a different conversation.
yeah, right. Well,
So
before we go more deeply in it, let me just sort of preface it by just explaining on a high level what the WhatsApp thing is and what it's about. So, several years ago, Facebook purchased WhatsApp for $19 billion. And at the time, it was a bit of a controversy because Facebook obviously is all about advertising and using their data, to sell advertising to people. And WhatsApp, that company is very sort of privacy focused. So a lot of people who are using WhatsApp use WhatsApp because of that privacy focus. So, at the time that Facebook purchased or wanted to acquire WhatsApp, they had to get approval from the US and the EU to actually do this deal. And part of that agreement with uh, both the EU and the US is that they would not take the data from the WhatsApp people and try to monetize it or sell it to, in their regular course of business. So, Facebook has had WhatsApp for many years now. I want to say five, maybe. I want to say they did this in 2013. Can't remember, but it's been several years now, and nothing major has happened with WhatsApp. But people knowing what Facebook is, and they spent a lot of money on WhatsApp, it was, I think, in my mind, it was inevitable that this step would happen. And part of the reason why is because companies now have to be very transparent to sort of avoid privacy issues where they're trying to tell people what they're going to do with their data. So the uproar started when Facebook made a change to their privacy policy and basically said they're going to use some of this WhatsApp data to do kind of the typical thing that Facebook does. So I was kind of surprised that individuals were sort of upset about this because I thought in my mind, this is always going to go this way. It may have taken, 4 or 5 years to go this way, but it was inevitable to me that this was going to happen because obviously they pay a lot of money for WhatsApp. They wanted to always use that data. Um, so that's kind of the high level overview. Did I leave anything out?
no, you did a good job, Debbie.
Yeah, yeah. Now you were saying people should not be surprised. Is this what you were saying?
So what I was saying is that what is surprising is that people think that if they don't have any privacy required for their communication, then this should not affect them. Meaning, if they are not sharing secrets, company secrets, personal secrets that they don't want to be made public, then this is a policy change that doesn't affect them. So they can go ahead, keep using WhatsApp. But the implications of this go beyond what meets the normal eye, okay? And that's what we want to talk about, and help people understand what the implications of this policy, what they're proposing. So, yeah, I agree with you that it should not come as a surprise from a business perspective. You do want to monetize the data, and that is one of the reasons. So, when it comes to a company like Facebook monetizing that data, and what we have heard, gone through with the Cambridge Analytics, for example, uh, that kind of sets up a red flag to begin with, right, of the company not having a very tight safety net around the data that they are um, compiling and data they are sharing with third parties. And number three, which is also really important, is even if it's not a third party, internally, how are they processing that data and what are they doing with this data? So all that has to be factored in. So I want to come back to that, but I'll let you kind of weigh in, Debbie, and I want to talk a little bit about what are the implications.
Yeah, I agree. I think people, although it's good that Facebook updated this policy, that's what they're supposed to do, right? Be transparent, but people were very alarmed about what they read there, and rightfully so, because I think, people who started with WhatsApp, in my opinion, they did so because it was, very privacy forward looking. So I think in their mind is if they had known that, they probably would have chosen a different application. And we're seeing a lot of people jumping from WhatsApp to other applications. But on the flip side of that, I also know a lot of people in different countries where they very much rely on it. Like maybe that's like their main communication app, especially like country to country. Like I have friends in Africa, friends in China, that's kind of the app that they use to communicate outside of, their countries. And for them, it's not, for us here in the US, we have a lot more choice, or some other countries we have a lot more choice and some of them don't. But I think it does make sense for people to really fully understand what they're giving up when they're using these apps. So maybe you can explain part of that.
Yes. So what you said earlier was rightfully so, which is that the the promise was made that we're going to have privacy of this data. This is our data, right? So you're going to have end-to-end encryption, and nobody is going to be looking at privy to your data except for the intended recipients. But what is now transpiring and what the uproar is about is the fact that WhatsApp is saying that if you buy next or this month, actually, everybody's data is going to be shared with the parent company. And if you don't want that to be shared, then stop using the app, right? So this is not a choice. This is not an opt-in. It's no consent. It's take it or leave it. And there is the take it part is where what I want to focus on. What happens when you take it, right? So if you are going to accept this policy, not only are you now looking at what am I saying to Debbie, right, in a WhatsApp message, and a few other recipients, let's say it's a chain, but it is also able to identify who am I talking to and what is the nature of the conversation. So that is where there is massive significance, because not only do you know what is my sphere of interaction, influence, observation, etc., but also what are the kind of conversations we are having, and what is the direction, right? So it could be related to how we interact, what we're interacting about. Is it about product? Is it personal information? Or even if it's not personal, right? We could be just talking about we saw a movie and we really liked it, and this is what we like. That is enough for, if you process that data, to take that data and now to target the recipients, the users, the consumers of that app with whether it's technology or form opinions and do analysis on what they are, what their likes and dislikes are, do profiling. So very large and significant implications of this data being now shared.
Yeah. It's concerning, especially because I think people, I don't know, just my observation, I feel like people use Facebook in a lot of different ways. Maybe they weren't using WhatsApp. So adding that information together may reveal things that maybe you didn't want to reveal about yourself, to other people, to the public, whatever. I feel like, it's not like, because Facebook has a messenger app, right? So, like, I feel like things that people talk about on Messenger, they probably wouldn't talk about on WhatsApp. So I think it is troubling because then, even though they're saying, okay, we're going to monetize this data, but in what way, are you going, like you said, are you going to sell my preferences to someone? Are you going to start showing me ads? Are you going to start sort of, like, let's say you like tomato soup. Like, so now does everyone know that I like tomato soup now? What exactly is going to happen? And that's very much a concern, not only with Facebook, but with other companies that monetize data as well.
Yeah, and that takes us to another point, right? Which is if you are already sharing all this information on Facebook, then you really don't have anything to worry about, right? But to Debbie's point, right, to your point, how we are using WhatsApp is different than what we're using Facebook for example. I actually don't post anything on Facebook that I don't want them to share. So, for example, I just did a post on diversity in AI. I want them to share this, and so I shared it on Facebook.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sharing very impersonal kind of information there. But
Hmm.
if you are sharing information about your personal life on Facebook, and you're sharing the same amount of kind of data on WhatsApp, you're having the same conversations, then there's really no repercussions. Okay. However, if you are using WhatsApp for messaging, for posting, for a more intimate and a more pervasive fashion, then it becomes that your data is of higher significance. That's one. The other, to your point about Facebook, right, is and other companies who are monetizing and using this data, Google, for example. I mean, the app, who is not, right? What you may remember last year, Wall Street, I think last year, Wall Street had done a expose of apps that were sharing data with Facebook, which you didn't have to even be a Facebook user, and your data was being sent to Facebook. And this could be really private information, right? This could be very personal information, such as how much you're exercising, what your weight is, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of speaks to a larger need of not as consumers, what are you sharing? What are you, as users, what are you sharing digitally? What are you tracking? But some of the information you're using apps for, right? And you're not thinking that this is going to become public knowledge. And if it does, then that becomes a big issue. And in this case, it happened to be that these apps were sending very personal data to Facebook, but it could be the very fact that they're collecting it, and if it wasn't secured and could be accessed by the perpetrators, for example, or people who shouldn't have access to, then the very fact that they're collecting this data can be a problem, and especially if it is not in line with what they need to collect, right? So that
Hmm.
by itself can be a problem. And the very fact that you're sharing it now with another company who can provide do further analysis on it, and then think about it, can correlate with other information that they are gathering.
Right.
That is where it starts kind of having, bigger and bigger and bigger spheres of influence. So
Yeah.
see
Right.
social dilemma, for example.
Oh yeah, definitely. And then too, I mean, you never know. Like, like women who are in abusive relationships and they're trying to get out, you know, to maybe move, or they're trying to coordinate with someone secretly. Who's to say that someone's name won't get correlated with you on Facebook, and that, so who is responsible then in that type of situation? So I think that the harm is, people should have rights to privacy whenever they choose that. So in a way, you're sort of, the way that this has come about is basically saying, we know that you chose this app because you wanted it to be private, and now we're changing the fact that the main reason why you use the app is, we're gonna do something different with it, which is a problem, I think.
Right. And then, stepping away from WhatsApp and Facebook, you bring up a good point about technology, such as Strava, for example. I gave this example a couple of years ago. Well, when you talk about people in abusive relationships. Okay. Now, Strava is an application that comes with iPhone, for example, and you can choose to enable it if you want to track how hard you're working out, and to track of the intensity of your workout, etc. Um, Again, a couple of years ago, Strava published on their website a heat map of where all the technology was being deployed across the world. And it became very obvious that some of these areas were so remote and not really inhabited, that looking at it, you could actually see the location for some of the military installations for the U.S. Okay, where they were set up. And here, so you're taking this very innocuous information. There is no PII in it. However, the very fact that it was showing that they had this app in certain locations kind of gave it away that there was something that was not normal, and you could glean from that this was a high risk kind of a data share. So it really comes down to this. Okay, three things. One is if you are a business, and especially in the digital world, only collect what you want, right? That is a golden rule, right? Don't collect information that you don't need. And number two, if it is regulated data, then it is very easy as a business, and there is no excuse for not protecting that information. But most importantly, number three, which is don't rely on regulations to do a risk assessment of what data can be misused. Okay, do a risk assessment based on your context, not based on what XYZ is doing, because they may be in a different environment where they can control and where they can apply better protection around things. You, as a business, have to understand what is the risk that comes from your environment, and what is the kind of data that you're collecting. It may not be regulated data, but is it something that can have repercussions if it is exposed and accessed, and especially harvested, right, and exposed? So in this case, Strava was sending information out and sharing information which was not PII, right? It is not personally identifiable, but is a prime example of where it gave away locations which was extremely sensitive data and extremely sensitive to the security of USA. And then going back to how else can it be abused? So if you are a victim of domestic violence, and you are in a home, right? Or somebody's in a home where they are there for a certain reason, and their secrecy is of paramount importance. Think about what is the repercussion of something like Strava, or something of a application that can give away information about your location, where it could point to, you can put two and two together and say, okay, yeah, it must be, this is where the so-and-so is at, for example. Okay, again, goes back to that whole problem we were talking about, how certain amount of data, a certain set of data or certain types of data by itself may not be an issue, but if you start correlating and analyzing large data sets, it can have devastating value.
Right.
Effect.
So I think just the takeaway, and it's something that I talk about and you mentioned as well, is, you should minimize what you keep or what you have. So if you have more stuff than you think you need, the less amount of data that you have, the less amount of data that has to be protected. And it lowers your risk significantly if you're not keeping things that you don't need. Because if you have something that you don't need, it gets breached, then all of a sudden that data that you didn't know anything about or don't have a strong grasp about it, you're going to have to go through it because now a regulator wants to know what was in that, that data set. So being able to really, part of this is about promises to consumers, right? So if you
Right.
promise you're going to do something, you need to really follow through with that. And that's what I think the regulation is, and to also make sure that you're aligning your data practices, whether that be how you're handling legacy data, how you're handling data coming in that aligns with your business purpose. And that is probably the easiest and cleanest way to sort of move forward in this new landscape.
Right. So, and for business purposes, you might have data, right, that you need to collect, but then make sure that you know what is the sensitivity of that data and don't rely on regulations. Use context-driven risk assessment, risk analysis to make sure that you are protecting data that can be sensitive.
Absolutely. So that's the end of our show for this stretch, and we'll see you for the next session next month. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.